offers this. What happens if we stop thinking about roots, tree roots, immobile, right? No matter which way the wind blows, the tree stays. True roots, like pathways, focusing on investing meaning in the connections that bridge things together. So that's sort of how the press is kind of stuff. I'm reviewing a book, place attachment right now. So that article is in there. I'll share it for people who are really interested.
Can I just ask a question, comment? I think, you're thinking about that in terms of mobility and people moving, but really many people, they don't have the economic ability to move.
Right.
And it's sort of more there's an illusion of movement. Because of the technology, because we can suddenly click and, be in a completely different environment of space. I don't know, that's just something that's really interesting me to think about, is about, what the real mobility and illusion of it, and sort of the economic factors that keep people where they are, and anyway, so.
No, I think you're right. And let's expand on that before we get into the meat of it. So mobility, I didn't specify. So what you're talking about is sort of social mobility, right?
Well, not necessarily economic movement.
Well,
not in terms of climate, but just like, just acknowledging of circumstances,
Yes, I think that the mobility, that's a true point. There's another side to it, which is even for people who can't physically move, a lot of their daily life is dependent on the movement of things around them. Mm-hmm. So wealth, information, waste, energy, resources. So the mobility of those flows, right? So a person might be immobile, right? Might not be able to move, but you are feeling the impacts of it, the big bubble being climate change. So you're right in terms of physical connection in place, but it's something that maybe it's one of your lunch forums. I guess you was trying to figure that out. One of our thoughts about teaching in North Carolina, there aren't really that many great landscapes to show.
Design landscapes.
Usually have to hit the road. I think personally, the best landscapes in our state are in the mountains and on the coast, not in the Piedmont. There are much better cities, even in the Piedmont. But there are places that have attempted to apply different thinking and meaning, and it prompts sort of our own thinking about our own backyard. So you all know this one, right? So this is North Carolina Museum of Art. This is the original proposal. This is the picture this garden. It literally spells picture this. Before I moved to North Carolina, this was the only North Carolina landscape other than UNC's campus that I knew about. Why? Because the designers who were from Los Angeles decided that the most memorable thing about this place is allowing people to locate it from the air and flying hard view. So in their site analysis, you see the North Carolina Museum of Art, and like, oh wow, they're right next to the airport. I wonder how many air routes or flight routes fly over the thing. Like, nobody knows where it is. They went riding up Blue Ridge Road, got lost, couldn't find it. This is like 15, 20 years ago. I kept passing it, like, maybe we make some sort of icon that you can see from an airplane, a big piece of pop art, and that will attract people there. It turns out there's no air routes that fly over our museum. I've never seen an airplane fly over there. There aren't any. But this idea of this stamped meaning, right? So that really it's about the imposition of things that gather people's attention on a place, right? On the flip side, when they got a couple $100 million, they decided to do this, make the big barn in the prairie, right? That barn has won a ton of awards too. I mean, I think you'd be shocked at how many awards that thing has won. But it's kind of funny going with kids, speaking to my 8 and 6-year-old. Daddy, the barn. Like, yeah, North Carolina. So this idea of symbol is meaning, right? Communicating symbols, right? What triggers are out there in the landscape that connect you to stories that let you know that this place is valuable or not. When we get into perception and behavior, you'll see that there are other cues when we visit this place. But you can see what they chose, right? Right? This is the iconic view of representing where we are in the Piedmont. For better, for worse. Sometimes it doesn't matter. I don't want you all to walk away thinking that this is about leisure places, right? So I was at the EDRA conference, Environmental Design and Research Association conference in Providence, Rhode Island last year. So I'm sitting at the table with Shalane, Henry Sanoff, and a bunch of faculty members from Turkey working in Istanbul. We were going to eat some sushi, right? And all of a sudden, their cell phones start going off, like in sequence, all around the table. They start looking, and they're like, "There's a protest going on right now in Istanbul." It's like, really? So we get out the iPad and look it up, and like, sure enough, people are out here in Taksim Square, which is a civic center in the middle of Istanbul. The president of Turkey, on his own, decided he was going to wipe out the central square of the whole country and put it in a mall. These people came unglued because they were going to lose that space. I mean, really unglued. So in certain cases, when places are at risk, it forces you to really think about what the meaning of that place is. There's no pressure or no stress on it. Nobody ever thinks about it. But when it can be lost or changed or compromised, that's usually when things come up. I've spent a good part of my academic career here looking at Southeast Raleigh. So work with those folks around Chambers Park. Changes there, not at the level of the Taksim Square, but significant. So it's something that's really significant. In the case of somebody like J.B. Jackson, he kind of embraces change. So we'll start with him. Because you need change. You need a long period of time. Now, I've never been to New Mexico. If you want to know about Mexico, ask Carla. She grew up there. Or watch Breaking Bad. That's all I know about Mexico. So me and Carla don't see New Mexico. So that's fine. One thing that's important about him as he deals with landscape is that it's not just the non-human side, it's the human side. So when you read A Sense of Time, Sense of Place, you study his piece, cultural landscape is just as significant as the non-human side of landscape. Those two dynamically together. That sounds like, yeah, that's how you're supposed to think. The other two authors don't agree with that. Their whole focus is the human made landscape. In his case, it's sort of a push and pull over sort of millennia. So these iconic views, right? That's the challenge, right? Can you ride around the Piedmont? This is one of my challenges, right? And pick a view that if you showed it to somebody and tell them where it was, they know exactly where it is. Try that by the end of class. Send you out. That'll be your assignment today. Pick a view around here that is so iconic you can show it to somebody and they know it's wrong.
Of the natural landscape?
Okay. See, that's the beauty of it. So this idea of time, right? These pueblos that are out here with the pre-industrial peoples there, the Navajo and others. You know, how they interacted with that landscape is a part of that landscape story, is a part of that meaning. Right? And later on, he goes to other things that we would consider kitsch. Right? So there's a famous book called Learning from Las Vegas. Study architecture, it's required reading Robert Venturi, Catherine Scott Brown. Which say, you know, maybe we need to start thinking about Las Vegas in a different way. Now, this is before the mega casinos. This is back when, if you rode down the strip, you know, and you went to the Golden Nugget Hotel, then the sign, the building of the Golden Nugget were Golden Nuggets, right? Or the Lucky Horseshoe. The Lucky Horseshoe building was some Lucky Horseshoes. And everybody was like, that's not, man, as soon as we can tear that down, that's embarrassing. Bob Venturi, Catherine Scott Brown decided, no, that's actually a part of our deal, right? That's a part of our cultural heritage, how we adapted, made a life, invented new forms, innovated, inspired by the place around us. It's all one big bag. They both took J.B. Jackson's class when they were students. So that's where they got that. So what we would consider the low landscape, everyday landscape, mundane landscape, is no better, no worse than the sacred, according to J.B. Jackson. Sacred to profane, it's all in the landscape. Because all those people had interactions with the place and conferred their own meaning. Now they didn't agree, and that's where power comes in. So if you're rich and powerful, then you remember the memories and the meanings of the rich and powerful. But it doesn't mean that there were other forms of making meaning there. So a bottom-up way of discovering it. If you follow J.B. Jackson's process, you get on a motorcycle and ride around. Talk to people. You wouldn't have any maps. You wouldn't take no pictures. Eventually, after talking to folks and observing on this, you would start to zero in on a path, right? And once you got on the path, you would employ more technical ways of documenting the landscape to find out meaning. We would call them ethnographic approach to things. The last part before leaving J.B. Jackson is the necessity of ruins. It's a really important article he wrote. So here, because we're changing so fast in the Piedmont and in the Triangle, we generally don't leave things that are abandoned or old or outdated. We'll tear them down and replace them with new as fast as we can. Replace the status on new. Right? So, according to J.B. Jackson, you need those reminders around, even if people aren't using it. Even if it's considered an eyesore or a negative thing in certain places, you need that reminder of what was there in the past. Erasing your history, even though you don't value it at the moment, over the long arc of time, is a negative thing. He has a really good quote. What New Mexico seems to offer is what it has always offered: the dramatic confrontation between the new and mobile, and the optimistic human installation on the land, and the overpowering timelessness of an ancient landscape with its cosmic chronology on the other. So this dialogue, right, between what we can do in the moment and this big arc of time is what forms meaning, right, for Brother Jackson. Now, getting to Loyola. In his article, Form, Meaning, and Expression in Landscape Architecture, he asks some interesting questions, right? So he asks, what sort of meaning can a landscape convey or hold? How do they convey or embody these meanings? And what kinds of correlation is there between the intention of the designer, what they intended to do, and the reception of the user? Right? So we left J.B. Jackson. J.B. Jackson was a brilliant landscape architecture mind, but was not a designer. He didn't design anything his whole life. He kind of described and documented things. Now we're moving to like the top of the shelf coffee table book, presidential medal award-winning landscape architect who designs everything. But this idea that I have this intention, but are the people really good in terms of meaning? What's important about